So we were in the process of doing an overview of book one and kind of analyzing some of the key passages and the characters. And if you've been following along, I've been typing up some reading notes. And I kind of urge you to make something similar to this. So you would have each of your characters. I just added a new one, so Mr. Shimmerda, um, because he's going to become a significant character, as you know, in the book, not only for his suicide, but for what he represents in terms of the immigrants who were overtaken in a negative way by the pressure and the natural opposition that the immigrants faced culturally, economically, socially, emotionally, psychologically. And so it's describing Mr. Shermida as he kind of comes over to the foil. So in literature, a foil character or a foil is somebody that is basically the exact opposite. That one shows how things ought to be or how it looks to be successful. The other one shows what it looks like to be a failure. And so the Shmurdas, basically their foil is Jim's grandparents and their home and their success on the farm, and they're contrasting to one another. And whereas Jim's grandfather is ultimately forgiving, and he's generous, and he has much wisdom and like commodity to give to the Shmurdas, they don't have anything. So we're going to look at his mentality. It says his face had a look of weariness and pleasure, like that of sick people when they feel relief from pain. Um, and he said almost nothing, and he rarely smiled, but we all had a sense of his utter contentment. So if we go over here, he's weary, but there's a sense of pleasure that he derives from, oops, from comfort. So he lives in a hut, basically a dugout of dirt, and they have no food and no warmth in their home. And his family is suffering ultimately. And he comes into the warmth and the like the security of the grandparents' home. And he ultimately kind of sighs this sense of relief. So he's weary, but pleasure is derived from comfort. Further, it says that he said almost nothing, but while he rested there, he had a sense of utter contentment. Um, so for him, oh my goodness, his satisfaction is derived from comfort and from pleasure. Unlike his daughter, unlike his family as a whole, both of the Shmurda, the elder Shmurdas, they depend upon economic stability, wealth, and social position that is secure. Is he going to make it? No. Is the mom going to make it? Not really. She depends on her children, but the children will. This is the immigrant story, unfortunately. Very, very few of the elder immigrants, the older ones that came, had the stamina and the perseverance to actually survive and make it in this new way of life. And we're going to look at in a second video when we talk about book two, kind of the disadvantages that they faced. So let's just keep going because I want to get through this overview, as I'm sure you do as well. Okay, so wow, how did I skip ahead so quickly? Okay, so the week following Christmas, what is going to happen? Mrs. Shmurda comes to the house. She runs about examining the carpets and the curtains and the furniture, and she comments upon them to her daughter in an envious, complaining tone. In the kitchen, she catches up an iron pot that stood on the back of the stove, and she said, "You got many, Shmurda's got not no got. I thought it weak-minded of grandmother to give the pot to her. She was a conceited, boastful old thing, and even misfortune could not humble her." So we'll do, so she was conceited. Um, and boastful. She was proud, and she was envious. What a great character. Um, and she was also, people who do not like this country ought to stay home, I said severely. We don't make them come here. He not want to come, never, Antonia burst out. My mamenka make him come all the time. She say, America, big country, much money, much land for my boys, much husband for my girls. So why did they come here? They came here because she wanted more, more, more. The immigrants were materialistic. They wanted more of everything and the promise of wealth. And your mama, I said angrily, wants other people's things. Well, your grandfather's rich, she retorted. Why he not help my papa? Ambrose be rich too after a while, and he pay back. He's a very smart boy. For Ambrose, my mama come here. So what is this disagreement? This is so symbolic of the attitude. So I'm going to put this as a theme. All right, so we had one of the themes is American Ideal, one is hospitality. This other one is going to be the irritation between immigrants and native-born. Oh my goodness. What is wrong with my spelling? Okay, native-born individuals. What do you make of this irritation that he says your mother wants other people's things? There's that mentality that they want things handed to them. And that is still a myth that is perpetuated. They want other people's things, and that he feels that they have a sense of entitlement. Entitlement is met with resentment from those who have worked hard to have what they have. And so that would kind of be a theme running through the chapter there. All right. I hoped the snooping old woman wouldn't come see us anymore, and I wouldn't mourn if she never came. But you see, a body never knows what traits poverty might bring out in them. It makes a woman grasping to see her children want for things. So there's the link between this. He links it in his maturity after the fact to sort of the poverty mindset. That poverty, we could also put under there, poverty changes people. That when you see your children in need, you become a different person, and that she may not have always been that way. All right, so on the morning of the 22nd, he woke up. He heard commotion in the kitchen, and unfortunately, we know what has happened. Mr. Shmurda has killed himself. I didn't highlight a lot in this section because it's just kind of talking about like facts at that point. The plot is just progressing and unfolding. And Mrs. Shmurda is, when I rode up to the Shmurdas one bright, windy afternoon in April, now they're obviously without a husband and a father, Mrs. Shmurda was baking bread, and by this time she could speak enough English to ask me a great many questions about what our men were doing in the fields, and she seemed to think that my elders were withholding helpful information, and that from me she might get valuable secrets. And so she's again trying to elbow her way into their culture but there's this assumption, a distrust or a mistrust. We could put over here in, we'll add to this, immigration and or poverty. Poverty changes people. Immigrants have, a distrust of the dominant culture. And she thinks that they are withholding valuable information from her. All right, so Antonia stood up, lifting and dropping her shoulders as if they were stiff. I don't have time to learn. I can work like a man now. My mother can't say no more how Ambrose do all and nobody to help him. I can work as much as him. School's all right for little boys. I help make this land one good farm. So she said, I can work now. I help make this farm one good land. it speaks to her drive, and obviously you would want to put the page number there. And then before we reached the stable, I felt something tense in her silence, and glancing up, I saw that she was crying. She turned her face from me and looked off at the red streak of dying light over the dark prairie. So she said, sometime you'll tell me the nice things you learn in school, won't you? My father, he went to school. He knew a great deal. But she won't get to have that. Mrs. Smyrna turned quickly to me. That cow gives so much milk, like what your grandpa say. If he make talk about $15, I sent back the cookies. There's another thing about the mom thinking she's been cheated and lied to. And Antonia is changing. It says, everything was disagreeable to me. She ate noisily like a man. She yawned at the table and kept stretching her arms over her head as if they ached. Grandmother had said heavy field work will spoil that girl. She'll lose all her nice ways and get rough ones. And she had lost them already. So it causes her to become like a man. All right. And moving to the next chapter. There was a disagreement. You can't trust foreigners. I would, again, put that into the notes. The grandfather gave them a cow, even though they didn't pay her for it. And then we get into the hired girls. But I like this final line here. It's often quoted from the book. Why aren't you always nice like this, Tony? They're kind of sitting back and they have a moment. And she says, how nice? Well, just like this, like yourself. Why do you all the time try to be like Ambrose? She put her arms under her head and lay back looking up at the sky. If I live here, like you, that's different. Things will be easy for you, but they will be hard for us. And that summarizes her perspective. Things will be easy for you, but they will be hard for us. So again, under this immigration and poverty, immigrants have a hard life. And that's pretty much a fact. Were there any symbols in the chapter? Anything that stands for something else? I think obviously the suicide stands for the pressure and psychological decline that result from losing one's culture, prosperity, oh my goodness, identity. Also, other things is that things that kind of are symbolic, language. And if you kind of took the time to look at it, you would see that as they acclimate to learning language, their success also grows. Oops. So the more that they become prosperous and learning the language, the more that they become a success and prosperous with their land, the more they acclimate to this new way of life. And so language sort of becomes like this point. And they're going to talk about how Lena, later on, one of the girls that's extremely successful, her language is almost perfect. So language is symbolic for your degree of success. All right, that's an overview of book one. So hopefully that helps if you hadn't gotten through it. Book two gets a little more interesting. It's just, it kind of continues the plot, and hopefully you'll be into it now. So I suggest just go back and read some of it and see if you can kind of get lost in the plot a little bit before you launch into book two. So